Hello Simmers and welcome to this beautiful morning here in Scotland. We are in Inverness with the airport scenery, a beautiful scenery by Boundless. It was on sale last week, got it for like just over £5, just over €6, and it's excellent value for money. It's a beautiful piece of scenery. Um, the airport is home to some airline flights, both domestic UK as well as some to the mainland in Europe. But that's not what we're here for today. We are parked at the General Aviation Apron, stand number 1, with this beautiful little add-on, the vFlyeAir Piper 28 Arrow. vFlyeAir already made this airplane in X-Plane 11. According to the X-Plane.org store information, this plane was rebuilt from the ground up for X-Plane 12. And I used to have a Piper 28 by Just Flight in X-Plane 11. And now Just Flight announced that they won't be developing for X-Plane 12 anymore. So they won't port over their existing planes to X-Plane 12, meaning that I had to go look for a different GA airplane for my sim. And this is what it became, because I was watching a live stream by Q8 Pilot, I think a week ago or something. And he mentioned this plane and he was very enthusiastic about this one. So I started looking for some videos, but I couldn't find anything. So I was quite surprised that there wasn't a review video for this one. So I decided to make one myself after I bought the plane and did a couple of touch and goes on a small airfield somewhere in Poland. I was hooked. And I thought, well, this plane deserves a little bit more attention from the community than it is getting right now. It's a marvelous add-on. When you buy the package, this is the model that you get. Well, that model looks absolutely amazing. It's a very good rendition of the Piper 28 in the sim. But it's not only that, because what you also get in the package is a lot of documentation. If you go to the airplane folder in X-Plane 12 to the vFlyeAir Arrow and you go to documents, you can see that there's a whole list of documents. Well, there's a README for the installation, of course, but there's also a pilot operating handbook. There is a guide that describes the differences between the G5 and the E1000 panels that are included, or models, I must say, because there are two separate models. And then there's a whole bunch of pilot's guides for some different radio systems, etc. So it's quite extensive. And if you take a look at the pilot operating handbook, for instance, you get 461 pages of Arrow content. There's general information, limitations, emergency procedures, normal procedures, performance, weight and balance, description and operation of the airplane and its systems, airplane handling, service and maintenance, supplements and operating tips. Now, of course, I haven't read this all in just one day. That's just not possible. So what I want to stress, this video is not a tutorial on how to properly fly a Piper 28 Turbo Arrow. This is just a product review to show you what you get when you buy this beautiful airplane. It is on sale at the store over at xplane.org, and buying this one will cost you, I thought it was $34. Let me just look it up real quick. Yeah, here it is. The G5 E1000 X-Plane 12, $33.95, so $34. There's also an X-Plane 11 version that is cheaper, but it's not compatible with X-Plane 12. So if you're an X-Plane 12 user, make sure you buy this one. It was rebuilt from the ground up, and it's an amazing piece of software. You won't regret buying it, I can promise you that already. So that's the model, that's the documentation. You can adjust or work with the model, make some changes through this very intuitive menu. On the lower left hand corner of the screen, there's that Piper brand mark. And if you click that, you get this options menu pop up, and you can make it slightly bigger. I will do that now for video purposes. And in this menu, you can switch between liveries. The airplane or the model add-on ships with a number of liveries. And you can rotate them in sim, so you don't have to go back to the flight menu, select another livery, reload the flight. You can just press next or previous. Now there's some nationalities. I'm here in Scotland, so I've chosen the British registration for this flight. But there's a number of American liveries. There's a German livery, a French, and a little more American stuff. But we'll stick to the British one for today. Then you can enter or open the checklists. They are also included. So if you use the checklist and the Pirate operating handbook, you can really make this a study level airplane. The checklist is divided in 4 tabs covering pre-flight, engine start and taxi, takeoff and climb, cruise, approach and landing. So if you use this and you read the normal procedures from the pilot operating handbook and deep dive in some of the systems and instruments that are included, then well, you can have your fun with this one. What you can also do is display, hide and use a tow tractor. Well, I'm not going to use it today, but know that the feature is included. You can set the weight of the airplane as well as passengers and fuel. And you can set some preferences and panels. Now, most of the preferences are for within the cockpit. So let's just first take a quick look at the passengers and the fuel. And then we'll set the preferences and the panels by jumping into the cockpit and show you around that. So pilot weight, co-pilot weight, that's good. Passengers, we don't have them extra. Let's just make the tanks full. For some reason, the right one contains 2 gallons less than the left one, so I just leave them at 37. And let's add in a little bit of luggage. Let's say we bring 40 pounds, 41 pounds, that's excellent. Okay, so having done that, let's get rid of this menu and jump into the cockpits. So this is the cockpit of the Just Flight Piper PA28. Now, the textures, I think, in some respects are sometimes a little bit low res, sometimes a little bit high res. That might have been done for performance reasons. But for instance, if you look at the starter key, that's quite a low res image. Well, I think that's just me nitpicking. I think like this inside airplane material could have done with like a little higher quality texture. But it's not bad, and it's not anything that is distracting. It's just I have seen better in add-ons. But that's the only thing that I can comment on this airplane that could be further improved, because in all other respects, this is just a brilliant add-on. So if you go back to that menu, let me just make it a little bit smaller. Right now we are in a cockpit with analog gauges. I've loaded the E1000 model. So if we go to glass panel, then you see that some things change. You get like a display with the PFD and the HSI in a digital format, and this gauge is removed. While if you go for analog, you get the manifold pressure and the fuel flow in here. And you get 2 analog gauges for the HSI and the artificial horizon. Now there is another model included, that is the G5 model. If you want that one, then you do have to go to the aircraft menu and select the other airplane. Oh, resume. Yeah, let's do this. So that's for the for most of the panel. Now, then you have some preferences in here. As you can see, there is some sort of reflection in the window here. If you don't like that, you can switch it off by just hide interior glass to on. And then you are just looking around as if there were no glass with reflections. Now, the reflections in itself are not the best on the glass, so I can imagine switching it off. I usually leave it on because it adds a little bit of immersion. and especially on the instruments. It makes them sometimes a bit harder to read, but then again, if you're flying a real airplane in certain light conditions, it will be hard to read the instruments. So I think it's just a little bit more immersive to keep it on. Um, right now the seat next to me is empty, but we set wait for the co-pilot. So what we can do is switch the hide passenger's interior view off. That means that you will display them. And now we have a charming lady sitting next to us. There's some on-screen warnings every now and then. For instance, if your altimeter is set on a wrong uh, on a wrong setting, you will get a pop-up every now and then saying that you have to adjust your barrow. Well, we're not going to bother too much about it, but I'm not going to hide it either. But if you don't like it, you can just hide that one by switching this one on. Ground equipment and the Avitap tablet, that is on the yoke by default, but if you don't like the Avitap tablet on your yoke, you can just hide it. As you can see with the airplane switched off on a Payware scenery airport, I'll get, well, in the region of 50 frames per second, a little under that. When we start the airplane, it will be a little less than that. So let's say on my system, and the system specs are in the description of the video, you are looking at like maybe 40 frames per second or something in flight, which is excellent for flight sim purposes. So, having run through the entire airplane, now this is the interior cabin, by the way. Another option is you can open and close like this thing, and it will impact the sound that you hear. So the FMOD sound in this add-on is actually quite good. And you can put the headphones on or off. They are noise cancelling, so that will also have an effect on the sounds that you hear. Now, right now, this is typical Scotland. We are running into a patch of rain. So let's just see what the situation looks like. We have a QNH of 1007, light and variable winds, visibility 8.2, at 1085 feet we have broken clouds, 19,407 feet there's an overcast, and at 29,000 there's scattered. That will be cirrus clouds, I think, but we will not get there at all. For us, the 1085 broken is the most important one. And if we look around, yeah, this is actually quite a low cloud base, so I think the 1000 feet is quite believable. Now the plan that I have for today, for the flight that I want to put this thing to the test, is fly from Inverness over the Highlands to the Isle of Skye to Broadford, which is a small airfield near the shore of the Isle of Skye. This will be default X-Plane 12 scenery, by the way. So this is what I'm planning to do. According to the weather overlay in Navigraph, that should be doable, at least in terms of the rain. Let's see if they have something with cloud cover. Well, nothing special down there. So at least that's the plan. So we are most likely to be taking off runway 29er. So we have to taxi out, backtrack the runway, turn around, then take off towards the sea. And I think we'll make a left-hand turn soon after we take off and fly via Inverness, maybe past Loch Ness for some sightseeing, then turn right, heading west towards the Isle of Skye. Now we are running through, like I said, we are flying over the Highlands, so we can do two things. If weather permits, I want to fly over these high mountains, and peaks are like 3,700, 3,800 feet, so we should be able to fly at a minimum of 4,500, but preferably 5,000 feet for this leg. If that is not doable, we might have to fly a little bit north, fly through this valley past the high mountains, or via the south side through this valley. and stay away from the peaks. If the cloud base is really low in this region, then we might have to decide to return to Inverness. Right now we have a massive patch of rain, so that is not the best weather. But the total flight time, if we can go in a straight line, will be roughly 35 minutes. If we have to make a little detour for weather, I'm counting on something like 45 minutes of flying time. As you hear, the sound of the rain on the canopy is actually very nicely done. But let's just prepare the airplane for our departure. So close the cargo door, close the co-pilot door, and remove the ground equipment. Now, like I said, this is not a tutorial on how to fly the airplane. I'm doing a real quick and dirty startup. I'm just going to make a short flight, nothing too special. I haven't read the manuals, so I'm just doing some basic actions. This is really a quick and dirty way to start up the airplane. No means proper procedures, proper checks whatsoever. If you want to do that, buy the package, read the documentation, follow the checklist, follow the normal guides in the pilot operating handbook. For now, this is just to demonstrate, well, basically the airplane, the sound set, and see how it handles. So having cleared all this, I will not use the checklist for this flight, so we'll just get rid of this menu. I have to get rid of the yoke, at least temporarily. So if you want to start up the airplane, first thing you have to do is of course switch on the battery. That is located here. The battery and the alternator are the red switches. So battery and alternator are on. Switch on the nav lights and the rotating beacon lights. So that is now working. And we have the nav lights on the wingtips also working. We can switch the radio master to on. We open the mixture, set the prop to full, open throttle a little bit, and we can switch the fuel pump on and turn the key to make sure that the fuel selector is set to a tank. I usually start with the left tank. Make sure it's not in the off position, but left or right tank selected. The white line on the red handle indicates the position for the selector. So we are now on left tank. So let's start her up. There we are. So exhaust gas temperature is rising. We have good oil pressure. Fuel is loaded. And we have to set our QNH because that is not correct. QNH was 1007. Now the altimeter here is in inches mercury. So we have to use a converter. You can find them online. Just Google millibar to inches of mercury and you will get metricconversions.org. You just type in 1007 millibars and you will find that is 29.736 inches. So 29.7 and a little bit. So we'll just set it slightly over that one and that should be sufficient. So there we are VFR flying. So that is on. I'm not using any GPS or further radios for this flight. I will trim the nose up. Trim wheel is located in here. There's an indication in here, but there's also an indication in here, which I find really convenient because it makes it very easy when you are flying and you have your primary instruments in front of you to see what the actual trim position is. So I'll just trim the nose slightly up. Nothing too spectacular. We'll switch the taxi lights off, on. And after a nip of water, we will release the parking brake and start our taxi towards the runway. Now, you can hear the F-mod sound. So I leave the headphones off for now, but when we are airborne I will put them on. But I think listening to the engine sounds on takeoff is a little bit better without the headphones on. So there are some short checklists inside the airplane. So the crosswind component 17 knots, well we have calm winds, so that's not applicable for this flight. We should do no aerobatic maneuvers or spins. So we weren't planning on doing that. So the takeoff checklist, fuel on the proper tank is set, that's the left one. Fuel pump is on. Engine gauges, we have manifold pressure, fuel flow, fuel quantity, oil pressure, PSI. This is all looking good. EGT is normal, so they are checked. The mixture is set to full, props set to full, flaps we should set them. That's this lever down here. It has 3 positions. 1, 2, and 3. I use the Bravo throttle quadrant, so let's just make flaps 1. So flap set, trim tab is trimmed a little bit nose up. Controls. Are free. And the doors are closed and latched. So we're good to go. So let's release the parking brake. And get out of here. Like I said, the altitude that I prefer to fly over the island will be 5,000 feet, so that's why I dial 5,000 in the autopilot window. I'm not intending to use the autopilot, but you will get a audible warning when you are within 1,000 feet of the altitude that is set in here. So I always set this to my preferred flight altitude for the flight that I'm going to do. So we're entering the runway, strobe lights on. If you want to know your ground speed, it's displayed in these 2 displays. Now, like I said, the scenery you're looking at here is the Boundless Inverness scenery. The scenery in the rest of the flight is Ortho 4XP combined with X-World Europe. From X-World Europe I removed the forest layer and I inserted OrbX Global Forests. That's a payware package. And I also use a small plugin called X-Roads, and it is really small, only a couple of kilobytes. And what that does is it removes all the secondary roads from the overlays. So it will only work on ortho tiles, but if you have ortho tiles installed and you don't like the way the secondary roads in the streets look in the sim, if you install X roads, it will remove those. It will only leave the highways in position. And I think it makes for a much more realistic sight from the air on towns, cities, villages, the countryside, etc. But we will try to get a glimpse of that when we are flying. Right now this patch of rain will prevent us from flying high, so we should be able to see it quite well if the visibility remains good. But anyway, landing lights on. We are good to go. Takeoff checklist was red. So just power up the airplane. Hit the brakes first, do a ground run. So 2,000 feet, 21, 2,500. back to 1500 feet, 1500 RPM. Okay, release the brakes. Set power to 2500 RPM. Airspeed active. Let's just rotate very gently, pull back on the yoke. There we go. Positive rate of climb. Don't go too steep, but we don't want to descend either. Gear up. And here we go. On a very gentle climb rate. Trim the nose down slightly. And let's turn left, head towards Inverness. I'm using the analog gauges, by the way, because I'm just a sucker for analog gauges. I love old cockpits with the old-fashioned gauges. If I want to see a glass cockpit, I'll take an airliner, but on my GA planes I would really love to see the old school gauges. It's just my personal preference. Okay, so flaps up. So lower the nose slightly to gain a bit more speed. Flaps are now up. Rate of descent at approximately 200 feet per minute, a little bit less preferably, so the airplane can accelerate, so a little bit nose down trim. Still have to push on the yoke, so a little bit more nose down trim. Now we're starting to accelerate, 95 knots. I want to be at roughly 110, 120 knots. Trim the nose down. There's 105 knots coming up. There's 110. Okay, so now I can see that the engine RPM is over 2500 RPM, so let's just go slightly back on the prop. I'm going to go to 2500 for now, we are still climbing. So there's 110 knots. Inverness up ahead. Let's make a shallow left-hand turn towards the city. Past that, and behind the city there should be Loch Ness. So let's fly there. So here we are at 1000 feet with a cloud base not too high above us. So let's ease back on the power as well as the prop. Try to make sure a level attitude for the airplane. Want to be at roughly 2200 RPMs. Airplane still wants to climb, so I'm slightly reducing the throttle lever. Oh, here's Inverness. And here you can see X roads at work. You can see that all the streets, the overlay roads are removed, and it falls back to the roads on the ortho imagery. Naturally, the effect will be nicer with higher zoom level orthos, but if you use orthos and you use X-World Europe or America or whatever region you live in, I think this is a very nice effect because X-World will place the autogen buildings very precise on the ortho imagery, and without those roads everywhere making weird turns. And yeah, I think the roads kind of reduced the quality of the picture that you were looking at. I still think the houses look a bit cartoonish, but without the roads it's much better already. And if you add the trees by global forests, then I think you have a pretty nice end result in the sim. So you might want to cover your ears. I'm going for an exterior view. Just let me get to level flights. Yeah, something like that. So straight ahead is Loch Ness. And it looks like the edge of the rain is somewhere over the lake, so I want to fly to the lighter area, see if we can get rid of that patch of rain, then gain altitude, turn right towards the Isle of Skye. But I'm not climbing into the weather. We are VFR, and with the high terrain to the right, it's very dangerous to fly without having visual contact with the ground. So we'll just have to see if that's possible. If it's not possible, we have to turn around, fly back to Inverness. But if you ask me, if you look at the light, if you add ortho tiles, then X-Plane 12 really isn't that bad. I think it's a beautiful sim. And flying this thing on manual controls is just such a delight. It handles beautifully. And I just really love it. Flying small GA airplanes is what X-Plane 12 was originally built for. At least I think. I mean, that's what most of the developers have experience with. So I guess by default that is the well, the best method of flying in sim. That doesn't mean that the SIBO mod and some of the other payware airliners aren't fantastic add-ons. I mean, they are great, and I thoroughly enjoy flying in the sim in general. But general aviation in X-Plane, that's just yeah, the wind, the flight models, the dynamics feel so realistic. And I'm not a real-world Piper 28 pilot, so I cannot compare the behavior in the sim with the real Piper, but I did flew gliders in the past. And when I take control of an add-on in X-Plane, I still have more familiarity with the flight dynamics than I have in Microsoft Flight Simulator, that I have also installed, by the way. But X-Plane is still my preferred sim. Doesn't mean that MSFS is a bad platform, not at all. It has evolved very nicely over the past 2 years, maybe even 3 years in the meanwhile. But yeah, I'm an X-Plane guy, I think. So I'm a bit biased in that respect, but I really love this sim. You gotta have a bit of patience with them, and I think they are making some wrong priorities in their development stage right now. I mean, releasing update after update with ATC related stuff, but not listening to the wishes of some major developers, I don't think is a very smart strategy. I also think they should have waited with the release of X-Plane 12 at least 7 or 8 months, and the version that we are in right now, they should have released this as a first beta. Then the reception of the sim would have been a lot more smooth than with the beta that they released last November with the clouds, etc. I mean, the clouds have just received such a massive update, and they're not there yet. There's still work to be done, but they are working on it, and they are showing immense progress. Now, if I look to the right, I have this band of clouds down there. I think I will go to the right, see if we can fly through this valley to that position, and then decide what we'll do down there. I will try to gain more altitude, so we'll increase prop RPM to 2500, set power, and make sure that the airplane climbs. Let's see if we can reach that 4,500, 5,000 feet altitude that I set at the start of the flight. But I think we're going to run into some serious problem with those massive patches of rain over there. But then again, it's Scotland. It's supposed to be rainy, I guess. And we should be able, if we fly along this heading, we should be able to fly into a valley down there, and I still have serious hopes that we can fly at lower altitude through the valley below the clouds towards the Isle of Skye. So I think that will be the preferred plan right now, because I don't like the idea of flying 5,000 feet in the air, going through clouds, not having any visual reference with the ground. So when we are in VFR rules, that's just not possible. So I will let's do that. Let's just maintain this heading for now. And not fly very much higher, so let's go back on the prop. 2,200 RPMs. Just have to fly along this little valley here, and that will end up in a bigger valley between two high mountain patches. So let's see what happens with the visibility when we do that. I'm not too fond of what I'm looking at, so right now turning back to Inverness becomes a very real option. Sometimes in X-Plane, when you are at a cloud and then it's just like 1 second, and behind it it's much better visibility. But in real life, if I were looking at clouds like this, I would have turned around immediately. This visibility is very poor. No, let's not do this. We'll go back to Inverness. Doesn't feel good, so don't do it. I think Laminar didn't, well, like I said, there's still work to be done on the clouds. They're not perfect yet, but they have improved a lot. And when I fly and I see in the sim a cloud structure that makes me say, well, do I want to fly through this? I think they're doing something right, because at least it means it's a realistic representation, and like a wall of moisture that we had in front of us is just a little bit too much. So let's return to Loch Ness. But the fact that this sim provoked that reaction in me, like, well, do I want to fly in that? That's, I think in itself is a very positive development, because with the first version of the beta with the clouds that were in there, Well, I don't think I would ever had that experience, but this is starting to look good. We're now really blinded by the sun, so visibility remains poor. But we should be able to turn left as soon as we are back over Loch Ness. That will be in a few minutes, I guess. Now what you also have to do every now and then is take a look in here and make sure that you keep your fuel quantities a little bit balanced. Now right now it's 37 and 35. We are running the left tank, so I will now switch to the right tank and bring that back to 35. So you can either set a timer for yourself that you switch tanks every couple of minutes. I usually look at the contents of the tank and decide what to do then. As you can see, performance base 40 frames per second with some very demanding clouds and weather situation. So very good performance for this little airplane. Now Loch Ness, yeah, there it is, that's Loch Ness. So let's just make sure that we stay at this altitude. And then we'll turn left over the water back to Inverness. So let's turn left in here. I think this is clouds on the ortho imagery, by the way, that white patch that you're seeing down there. So that's the downside of having ortho. Sometimes you have some clouds in the imagery. Let's descend, because the cloud base would be roughly 1000 something feet. We are now 1500, so we still have to descend a little bit to make sure that we stay clear of the cloud base. Oh, and by the way, the overlay roads are gone, but the traffic on the roads still remains visible. So you still see cars and trains drive along the infrastructure. It's just that the layer of the infrastructure is removed with X roads. At least for the secondary roads, only highways remain visible in the landscape. But in general, I really like that little plugin. I will put a link to it in the description of the video. Well worth the downloads, because it actually is very small indeed. Let's see if I still have it in my downloads folder. Yeah, I still have it. It's 114 kilobytes X-Roads, the plugin. I think I'll do a video on it someday. It's just a little bit of work having to go to a region, uninstall the ortho, go for the default scenery, then put in the ortho, then put in X-World, then put in X-Roads to show the difference. It's not a process I'm looking forward to, but I think it's worth it, because that little plugin deserves a little bit more attention for those who use ortho tiles. So let's continue on this heading. We'll fly south of Inverness towards the airport to land on runway 29 again. This should be an extended base leg for that attempt. Oh, by the way, if you don't like the reflections, like I said, you can remove them. Let's see what that looks like. It's all a bit more crisp, but I'll leave it like this. So we still have light wind, visibility of 8 miles, so we should be alright for landing. It's just marginal VFR weather, it's not the best. But it can be a lot worse. But look at how dark this is some serious rain. And then with the light coming below the clouds, I really love the scene I'm looking at here. This little hazy visibility in the distance. The rain striking on the windscreen. Making it hard to see stuff. I like it. Turning a bit further left to stay clear of some higher terrain to the right. Let's stay at altitude, so increase power a little bit. Trim that nose down. Yeah, we're clear of rain. It is possible. Right, so the airfield should be just before this peninsula. All right, there it is. Right, this is the airfield, so this is our runway. So we have to fly a little bit towards that area to give ourselves some final. And back into the rain it is. Right, so let's pull on the yoke, let's ease back on the power, start to reduce some airspeed. It's Beautiful. Airplane handles so incredibly nice. Add in a little bit of nose up trim. So 95 knots. 90 knots, that's sufficient for now, so increase power a little bit. Let's increase the prop RPM. Okay, set flaps 1. Let's start to make a left-hand turn. Yep, there's our little runway. So we'll just continue a left-hand turn. Lining up with the runway, closing the power further. Gear down. Flaps 2. We have an airspeed indication of 75 knots, a ground speed of 69 knots, so we have about a 6 knot headwind, 5 to 6 knots, that is excellent. So let's go full flaps, increase power a little bit. Such a little, beautiful little airplane. That was a little bit firm, flared too late. But anyway, we are here. Let's retract the flaps. And roll out all the way to the ends. Vacate the runway there. and go back to our general aviation parking. So yeah, to summarize, I really love this add-on. I think it's a beautiful general aviation airplane. If you are looking for a general aviation airplane that is somewhat study level, you can easily buy this one. You won't be disappointed. The documentation is extensive. If you use the documentation and the checklist, you can really make this a study airplane. I don't know in how much detail all the separate systems are actually modeled, but I know that it's not an arcade add-on. I think the price of $34 is justified. I really enjoy flying this little airplane. So landing lights off and strobe lights off. Transponder is off. Yeah, a really nice airplane, and you also have to remember for $34 you get basically three types. You get the analog, the what was it called? The E1000 and the G5. Yeah, it's just so much fun. It flies brilliantly. Yeah, I can wholeheartedly recommend you to purchase this airplane if you're looking for a good general aviation airplane in X-Plane 12. This you won't be disappointed with this airplane. I think it's yeah, really good. Won't say the best, but it is excellent. Well, look at that. Beautiful. So parking brake is set. We can kill the mixture. Slide back on the prop. Fuel pump can be switched off. The taxi lights and the nav lights can be switched off. So can the radio master. Battery and alternators off. We can set the ground equipment, open the co-pilot and the cargo doors. And that is the end of our review of the vFlyeAir Piper 28 for X-Plane 12. Wholeheartedly recommended by me. If you are into GA flying in the sim, then this one deserves a place in your virtual hangar. So that's it for me. I hope you liked this video. If you have any tips, tricks, comments, questions whatsoever, please leave them in the comment section below. As usual, please do so in a respectful manner. And I hope to see you all again another day on another video. So thank you for watching and bye bye.